This presentation is about worldview, or cultural explanations of life and death. This is from a course given at the University of Utah called Cross-Cultural Communications, and my name is Karen. The first thing that we're going to examine is a couple of quotes from our textbook. So some people think of worldview as religion, but as our textbook points out, worldview is larger than religion, because religion incorporates only certain beliefs, where worldview takes into account people who are also non-religious. So the first one says that the worldview of people is the way they interpret reality and events, including images of themselves and how they relate to the world around them. So here we have an instance where humans are looking at where do they fit into the world around them. The second quote from our textbook says that worldviews deal with significant philosophical questions. We'll look at those questions in a minute. Worldviews also govern life in smaller ways by providing direction for the more practical features of living. Okay, here are those philosophical questions. So our worldview, or our perspective of the way we interact with the world, seeks to answer these types of questions. The first one, what is the purpose of life? So why is it that we're here, and what is it that we're doing here? Cultures all over the world have these same types of questions, even if they're not religious. And so it's part of how we interpret, like the quote says, how we interpret our reality and our interactions with our environment. Okay, the second one is the world ruled by law, chance, or God? Okay, think about that for yourself. What is it that you believe? Do you think that the world is governed by God, or do you think that the world is governed by chance, or just some sort of laws of physics? Okay. Number 3 is, what is the right way to live? Again, our ethnocentric view says that my way is the right way to live. But if we're ethno-relative and we look at different cultures, each culture has their own idea of what things we need to do to be living the correct way. Okay. The fourth one, what are the origins of the universe, and how did life begin? What happens when we die? What are sources of knowledge? Where does our knowledge come from? And what is good and bad, or right and wrong? Each of those things are cultural specific and are governed by our culture's worldview. Let's take a look at the 3 different constructs that our book breaks it down into. The first one is religion, and we're going to look into this a little bit deeper, which is the belief in the existence of reality greater than humans. And we'll look at how the book classifies things as a religion. The second one is secular humanism. Secular humanism believes that religion is a projection of man's own aspirations and yearnings. So it's the things that we as individuals want to be true, not necessarily because it is out there. Okay? The second one is that values are grounded in earthly concerns. And the third one is that death is the end of our existence. Secular humanism often encompasses a lot of people who are not believing in some sort of greater being or a God, but they spend a lot of time communing with nature, or spending a lot of time finding those sort of peace or spiritual things outside of themselves, okay? But not necessarily related with God. Spirituality is to live a life of faith without formal religion. And the goal of this spirituality is to find an inner peace. So we're looking inside of ourselves to find the peace that we're looking for, and to answer some of those questions, those philosophical questions we were looking at. Okay, often the lines between these 3 things can be blurred a little bit as you try to figure it out. It's not really necessary for our purposes to make sure that we can classify someone or some culture as one or the other. It's just important for you to think about it in terms of these are things that exist, and we might be more one or the other. Let's take a closer look at religion. Okay, religion provides structure, discipline, and social participation in a community. We've talked in this class before about how social structure is really important for a culture, and how humans all over the world, we seek to have some sort of social structure. We are very social beings, and religion for many people fulfills that social need. Okay. Second, it provides the explanations and assigns values to otherwise inexplicable phenomena. So as we're looking at those questions, like what is the meaning of life, or how did the universe begin, if we look to a religion can give us those answers, which often makes people feel comfortable. Remember that how our brains don't like ambiguity, having a religion tell us what things are or how things came to be often is a comfort to our brains in terms of being able to close that cognitive loop so that we're not feeling ambiguous about things. The third one is that it responds to the basic human need to understand the purpose of life. So humans all over the world often have these same types of questions about what is the purpose of life. And so religion can give us that answer for many people. For other people, like I said, the secular humanists and people who are just spiritual people may be looking either to nature or inside of themselves to find that same answer. Okay. Two of the important questions that I think are involved in religion that I would really like you to think about, I've included one of them on our discussion questions. The first is, how are economics and politics influenced by religion? So in this class we've talked again a lot about how things have intertwined, and religion is often intermixed with how a culture's economics or political policies are impacted. In some cultures, that's more than others. So, for example, in the United States, the fact that it's kind of a Christian-based country, meaning that a lot of the people who founded the country were Christian and believed in a God, we see representations of God show up in our political arenas, on our money, now in the Pledge of Allegiance, and so those types of things tend to be an undercurrent to even political aspirations. If we look at cultures in Islam, if we look at countries that are Muslim countries where they're practicing Islam, we have a much closer tie in terms of the politics and the religion. And so here we have a part where a very high majority practices the religion. We might have laws that dictate that we wear religious clothing to match our religious ideals as well. And so cultures have varieties of how closely the economics and politics are tied to religion. Okay, those are just two examples. The second question that I think is really important for us to think about is, how is it that religions try to help their members find a peaceful existence? Sometimes you'll hear people say things like, religion is created to placate the masses or to help the masses feel peace. And how is it, I want you to think about that, how is it that religion does that to help members find peace? And why is it that that then is an effective tool for helping a culture continue, okay, or helping a religion continue? These are the ways that the book decided to classify something as a religion. Okay, I've had students in the past who say, well, I don't believe that this one is a religion that they've listed, or I don't believe that this one is a religion. I think that those are more just ideologies. The book lists how the religions were decided upon in terms of what they decided to classify as religion. So the first thing that it has to do with is that there's some sort of speculation. And the speculation, our brains do the speculation, but the religion, it explains what about all of this inexplicable phenomenon. So if I'm wondering how is it that the world was created, then I can turn to my religion, and my religion gives me some answers that then help me feel peace and comfort. Okay, so it's psychologically comforting. It helps our brains. Okay, the second thing is that in order to be considered a religion, there needs to be some sort of sacred writing. Okay, these writings are transmitted from generation to generation. Now, they use the term sacred writings, but the truth is it doesn't actually have to be written down. It could also be an oral tradition where those things are passed from generation to generation. But in order for the religion to continue, that is an important piece for that information to be passed down. The third thing is religious rituals. So if you think about your religion or religions that you're aware of, think about what types of rites of passage or religious rituals they have that are involved. That's a good clue that something is a religion and not just someone being spiritual. Okay, the last thing that the book talks about is ethics. So anything that the book has classified as a religion has a code of ethics that are encouraged by the members of that religion in order for them to be living what the religion says is a good or right life. Okay, it tells us what is acceptable and unacceptable, and it really regulates or leads us toward the behavior that is acceptable. So it might have, a religion might have some sort of teaching that says, if you do, this good thing, then this will be your reward. So religion tends to push people toward following the code of ethics, that there's some sort of reward in the end. Different from spirituality, where we're looking inside of ourselves for peace. There really is no reward aside from peace. There's no reward in the next life or something, because that is often not believed in. Okay, so that is really important for us to have the writings, the rituals, and the ethics, some sort of code or rules that we must follow in order to be living the religion well. And then the speculation, where the religion is able to explain that speculation that we have as individuals. So those things are really important, or in terms of our book, for classifying something as a specific religion. Okay, these are the 6 major religions that the book talks about: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and Confucianism. It lists reasons for why it chose those as the 6 major religions that it would talk about. It talks about the number of people worldwide, or the influence in terms of how much it has percolated the communities. So Judaism may not have as many members worldwide, but it has influence in several places, and so that makes it one of the major religions. The book has a lot of interesting information. I'm not actually going to go through that information here. I wanted to touch on why we classify things as religion or not, and kind of explain some of those more difficult parts. But I encourage you to read these sections on these 6 different religions, because it's fascinating. It's really fascinating to see how they're the same and how they're different. But what is important for us to take away from this worldview is that if everyone in the world, or every different culture, has a different worldview, then that means that if we each are ethnocentric, that we are not seeing things from someone else's perspective. So as deeply as our worldview is in us, part of our cultural values, that's where we often get some of our values assigned from, is from our worldview or religion, then those things are very deeply ingrained. And so asking someone to change is very difficult when they have also participated in that cultural value or worldview for their life. And this is one place where being more ethno-relative, in terms of taking in the information and trying to see something from another's perspective, is very helpful. In fact, we see wars started over people not being able to accept that someone else could have a different perspective. So what often happens with our worldview is that it becomes our absolute morality. We experience absolutism for our worldview, and we assume that we are perfect and everyone else is wrong, which then leads to sort of ultra religious groups that are even outside of the teachings. They may not be following that code of ethics, but in the name of their God are doing terrible things to others because they don't match the worldview. So our worldview interacts with so many other parts of our culture that it's really an important piece. And so if you want to understand parts of someone's culture, you also have to understand what their worldview is in order to have that more ethno-relative perspective, to see something from someone else's perspective.